Hi everyone, welcome to this Math 082 video. This is 4.6 where we actually learn how to solve equations. So up until now in 4.1 through 4.5, all we've been doing is factoring. So all we had was expressions, as for example, n squared minus n or n squared plus 16. These are all expressions because they don't contain an equal sign. You can't solve expressions. You can't solve anything that doesn't have an equal sign in it. So now we're going to be looking at problems like this, where we have something on the left-hand side of the equal sign and something else on the right-hand side, and we're going to be solving for x. In order to do this, we need to use what's called the zero product property. So zero, as you might have figured out earlier in your math career, is a very special and unique number. In fact, if you study the history of mathematics, civilizations for thousands of years didn't even acknowledge zero as a number. It's kind of interesting. So one of the properties that zero has, that no other number has, is the zero product property, which is that if I have two numbers, a and b, and their product equals 0, the only way for that to be true is that either a equals 0 or b equals 0. So let's think about a different problem. So for example, what if I told you that a times b is equal to 2? Does it necessarily follow that either a equals 2 or b equals 2? Absolutely not. For example, a could be 4 and b could be 1/2. A could be 8 and then b would be 1/4. In fact, there's an infinite number of numbers that satisfy the equation a times b equals 2. So 0 is unique in this sense, okay? It's the only number that has this property. So let's use the zero product property to start the first example. So here, instead of a times b equals 0, we have something a little bit fancier. We have x plus 4, and we have 2x minus 3. Even though they're a little bit fancier, the zero product property still absolutely applies. So for example, the only way for this whole thing to be equal to 0 is either for x plus 4 to be 0 or for 2x minus 3 to be equal to 0. One of those two statements must be true. So to find out the possible values of x, all I have to do is solve these two equations. So if we start over here, we can subtract 4 from both sides, and we get x equals -4. Likewise, over here, we can add 3 to both sides, and then we have 2x equals 3. So then we have to divide by 2, and we find out that x equals 3/2. So these are two solutions, and we can write it like this. We can write x equals -4, comma 3/2, or we could just say x is equal to -4 or x equals 3/2. One of these two statements has to be true. That's the only way to satisfy that equation. Okay. So let's keep going and do another example. So let's go ahead and look at example 2. So we have x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Now you notice here that what hasn't been done for us? Well, the AC method, the factoring, has not been done for us yet. So what we have to do is first factor the trinomial on the left-hand side before we proceed. So we need two numbers that multiply up to 15 and that add up to -8. So it looks like -3 and -5 are going to do the trick. -3 times -5 is +15. -3 plus -5 is -8. So I can factor this trinomial by writing x minus 3 times x minus 5 equals 0. And I can furthermore continue by solving this and setting both terms, or both products, equal to 0. So that means that either x equals 3 or x equals 5. Those are my two solutions. All right, let's do a few more examples. So if we look at example 3, we can see that it's different because we have -9 on this side. Okay, an important thing about the zero product property, you can't use the zero product property until you have 0 on one side. If you don't have 0, oops, sorry about that. If you don't have 0 on one side of the equation, then there's no sense in using the zero product property. It doesn't make sense. So what we need to do first is we need to add 9 to both sides so that we have x squared minus 4x, minus 11, no, that's not right, minus 12 equals 0. Okay, if you don't do that first step and you try to apply the zero product property to -9, it's not going to work. All right, so now we have a trinomial equals 0, and we can proceed as last time. We can use the AC method. We need a number that multiplies up to -12, or two numbers rather, that multiply up to -12 and add up to -4. So I believe -6 and 2 will do the trick. -6 plus 2 is -4. So we're going to have x minus 6 and x plus 2 equals 0. So we're going to have two solutions here. We either have x equals positive 6 or we have x equals -2. All right, let's do two more examples here. So if you look at example 4, again, we don't have 0 on one side. And we can't do anything until we have 0 on one side. I cannot use the zero product property until I have 0 somewhere or other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. All right, so we have 8x squared minus 4x equals 0. So let's remember our factoring steps. Remember, the very first step that we should always do is the GCF. The GCF in this equation, again, pause it if you want to, is x. Oh wait, is it just x? Nope, there's something else too. I can also factor out a 4. So my GCF is 4x. So if I factor out a 4x, then I have 2x minus 1 equals 0. But remember, we're not done yet because we still have to actually solve for x. So my last step is to say that either 4x equals 0 or 2x minus 1 equals 0. Over here, we divide by 4, and we see that one solution is that x equals 0. Over here, we add 1 to both sides and then divide by 2. So our other solution is that x is equal to 1/2. Notice in all of these problems, we tend to get two solutions, and that's always going to be the case. Sometimes those two solutions are identical, so you only have one unique solution, but generally speaking, unless it's prime and you have no solution, you will have two solutions for your trinomial. All right, look at example 5. Again, remember your procedure. The very first thing you always look for is the GCF. In this problem, unlike the other ones, we already have 0 on one side, so we could use the zero product property as soon as we factor this trinomial. So you might notice that our GCF is not 1 this time, but x. So I can factor out an x. So I have x times x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. So then the trinomial inside the parentheses can be factored using the AC method. So we're going to need two numbers whose product is 12 and whose sum is 7. And that's going to be 3 and 4. So then we can continue and factor this trinomial And notice this time we have not 1, not 2, but we're going to have 3 different terms to set equal to 0. So that means this guy has 3 different solutions. So our 3 solutions are either x equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0. And if we just take the extra step and solve these last 2, we find out that means either x equals -3 or x equals -4. So I will circle the 3 final answers for this problem.